Adam Pranica, host of the Essential Star Trek podcast, The Greatest Generation, often says that Star Trek is a place, and in times of trouble, Star Trek is the place I return to. It's soothing, it's hopeful, it has the comfortable rhythms of old TV, the disposable indispensability of a mandatory 22-episode season that necessitates that every good idea must be used, as well as a lot of the mediocre and bad ones, too. There's solace in the bad, texture in the misplaced idea that still somehow reveals character or context. What's best about Star Trek, though, is that you can pick your flavor. Want retro camp mixed with high-minded idealism? The original series has your back. Want the reliable, unkillable Honda Civic of television? The Next Generation is there for you. Need your Star Trek with a heaping spoonful of sitcom tropes mixed in with stark, serialized reflections on war? Deep Space Nine delivers, and keeps on delivering. Do you have a diamond miner's spirit and an extremely high tolerance for pain?
Oh, and crewman Bennett and Tatum over there, do you see them? If I'm not mistaken, they are preparing to mate. Do you think they might let me watch?
Not what I would have picked, but you know what? Good on you. But if you want the true disposable beauty of Star Trek, the empty calories of middling quality episodic weekly television that still somehow tastes great even when you know it's bad for you, turn to Voyager. Call it Stockholm Syndrome, but Voyager was my show as a kid. It was the one that was on, the one that was new, the one I could follow even if I missed an episode. Sorry, Deep Space Nine. Voyager and Next Generation seemed to be born into cable syndication rotation, meaning I would randomly catch a couple of episodes here or there on some blasted awful channel like Spike TV, generally out of order, and almost always of wildly varying levels of quality. A high-minded treatise on the relative humanity of the ship's egocentric but lovable holographic doctor could be paired next to an episode where ship goes too fast and now we're lizards. You get the idea. There's something deeply, spiritually comforting about Voyager, even when it's bad, maybe especially when it's bad. That extends to all Star Trek, really. It's a blanket of protection from the outside world, a foolish, single-minded reassurance that maybe one day it'll all work out. But sometimes the show itself isn't enough. This is evidenced by literally every fan community in the history of fan communities, but I would argue that there is no fan community that wants to live in the world of their fandom more than Trekkies. Go to any convention. Remember, we got a full immersive Star Trek experience before we got one for Star Wars. It also shut down first, so it goes. Star Trek fans just need more. And for a brief, beautiful time in the 90s and early aughts, we had more. More shows, more presence in the pop culture zeitgeist, and more ways to live Star Trek adventures due to a deluge of video games. The 90s and early aughts were a halcyon time for Star Trek games, from an availability standpoint at the very least. The license was seemingly cheap, and dozens of smaller developers affiliated with Activision tackled the growing PC gaming market with digital card games, real-time strategy starship simulators, point-and-click adventures, and shooters. Lots and lots of shooters. For a franchise about a post-scarcity society where exploration and peace were the main objectives of our protagonists, there were a lot of shooting games. And speaking of shooting games, my favorite was 2000's Star Trek Voyager Elite Force, developed by Raven Software, the folks who now seemingly exist to fix Call of Duty bugs. Elite Force was everything you could want from a Star Trek action game. It put you in the shoes of a brand new character so you could feel like you were personally helping the crew in an exciting life-or-death mission. It had a silly and over-the-top plot that felt right at home with the overall corniness of Voyager, and allowed for a wide variety of combat and role-playing opportunities. You fought the Borg, Klingons, Species 8472, Mirror Universe Terrans, and a wide assortment of original aliens. And it also looked and felt like Voyager in all the ways that mattered. For 2000, it was as close as you could get to living a real-life Star Trek adventure. Was it deep? No. Did it probe important questions about morality and humanity's place in the cosmos? Absolutely not. But it did have Hollow Match, a multiplayer mode built on the game's underlying Quake 3 architecture that allowed you to shoot a handheld photon torpedo cannon at your opponents, so, it's pretty true to Gene Roddenberry's original vision. You'll notice that all of this is very active, though. It's Star Trek as a setting, but not necessarily Star Trek as a place. You're moving too quickly through the set pieces, it's all running and gunning, and mostly on away missions. You barely get time to settle down and experience Star Trek because you're too busy shooting at the Borg to take it all in. In a way, this video isn't really about Elite Force. I spent so many hours in my youth playing Hollow Matches and replaying that campaign, a 6-hour campaign, mind you, but it always felt incomplete. That was until the release of the actual topic of this video, the expansion pack. You see, kids, before we had DLC, developers who had a successful game on their hands would make a bunch of new content for that game and try to sell it to us on an additional disc, usually, and hopefully, for less than what the base game cost. This extended the life of the game and allowed them to, later, combine the two discs into a third product for the latecomers who missed the first release cycle entirely. This new content could be anything from new maps to additional story content to updated graphics. Elite Force's expansion pack, however, was a little bit lower effort, but in a surprising and ingenious way. While Raven Software got a lot of acclaim for crafting a compelling story with a fun core gameplay mechanic, they had also done a stunningly faithful job of recreating the locations and character designs from Voyager. They had all of these assets that were used only for brief portions of the game during missions, and they needed something for the expansion pack. So why not let every Star Trek fan do the thing they so desperately wanted to do in the first place? Enter Virtual Voyager. While the expansion pack mostly served as an excuse to replace Joan Budenhagen's voice with Jerry Ryan's for 7 of 9, and to add a bunch of multiplayer maps for HoloMatch, Virtual Voyager was where the real fun, and we are using fun in a very, very loose sense of the word here, began. The mode, credited to Reginald Barclay, which is funny in the context of Voyager itself, but even funnier if you know the history of Barclay's, holodeck predilections, stitches together all of the maps from Elite Force's Voyager-bound levels and sets you free to roam them, in a very limited early 2000s mid-budget Star Trek game sort of way. What is presented is so loving, so detailed, and so accurate to the TV show that you're inclined to forgive the developers for their limitations. While it's definitely a commercial product, you can feel the love Raven has for Voyager and for Star Trek at large. The biggest chunks of new content in this mode come in the form of simulations. You head on over to the holodeck, which, wait, I thought this was already a holodeck simulation, so does that make it a holodeck inside of a holodeck? And load up a few different kinds of missions. One is a simple holodeck goes wrong scenario in which a pleasant garden simulation turns into a relentless onslaught of enemies while Hollow Boothby watches on in peaceful, contented silence. He's up to something. I'm watching you, Hollow Boothby. The second is a little Klingon infiltration mission. It's nothing, honestly. It's the weakest part of the whole pack, if only because the level itself feels comically small and difficult to navigate. This was not a good era for environmental storytelling and map-based puzzles. The third is a target range. We shoot gun at target. I didn't even capture footage of it. Does anyone ever have fun in the target range portion of a video game? The last one, though, is a real charmer. It's a rudimentary Captain Proton adventure that comes with its own proton gun and some bespoke enemies. As maps go, it's empty and basic, and there's no real dialogue, but the opportunity to have a goofy black and white zap-em-up serial adventure that ends with an admittedly extremely brief robot fight is exactly the kind of thing you would want from a Voyager game, and an excellent translation of the silly charisma that made the show so addictive in the first place. The other idiosyncratic mode in this expansion is tucked away inside an all-but-secret area. Ventral maintenance. This deck is home to crewman Jeffrey Dishler. He seemingly lives down here, and his duties are unclear, even to himself. It's cramped, it's dark, it's depressing. The only thing one can even do on this level is activate the landing gear. Going through his personal logs, you learn that he spends his time doing exactly 2 things: wondering what his actual job is, and researching video game development from the Earth's 20th century. This leads to one of the dumbest, most slapdash delights this expansion has to offer. Borg Slayer, a ridiculously inefficient top-down puzzle shooter that tasks you with saving 7 of 9 from the dual dangers of omnipresent Borg and confusing room layout switches. The camera is nauseating. The controls are retrofitted from the standard game, but locked in the top-down perspective, which is fixed on your character's orientation, meaning that every time you move, the whole scene whips around the bottom middle of the screen. It's awful, but it also feels true to the developers of Elite Force. It's a lark developed by a guy locked in a dark closet with nebulous duties and too much time on his hands. You can almost taste the Mountain Dew. Is Borg Slayer a disappointment? Yes, but it's a glorified Easter egg, one that comes as a reward for doing the actual mission of Virtual Voyager, and of Star Trek at large. Exploration. Exploration with no objective other than enjoyment is the name of the game in Virtual Voyager. You're let loose with a tricorder in a dream, wandering the halls and rediscovering bits of the ship in a slower, more deliberate way. Sure, there are some guideposts. It uses the objective system to guide you to the few events you can trigger while roaming the ship, but the reward for that exploration is more exploration. You get to discover more of the ship and appreciate walking the corridors of Starfleet's most far-flung starship. That is, when and where the game lets you explore. It was developed in 2000, mind you, so they couldn't and wouldn't build out the whole ship, much less a fully explorable version. The vast majority of Voyager feels tantalizingly out of reach, hidden behind force fields and locked doors.
Incredible!
But the overall feeling of being in Voyager and experiencing Star Trek as a place is one of comfort. The joy of exploration here is in the little details, fully written crew logs, Neelix's recipe book, and the little environmental Easter eggs that reward you for your curiosity and ingenuity. The little things you can do, ordering random food from the replicators, launching a shuttle, setting the ship to red alert, using the transporter, and fulfilling Captain Janeway's lifelong dream of self-destructing the ship.
What the?
Auto-destruct sequence initiated. 10.
That's enough.
9. 8. Security access
Hanson,
required.
you're committing
6.
treason.
5. 4.
That's it.
3. 2. 1.
Are all deeply satisfying and fun, even when detached from anything resembling a mission, and it all adds up to this coziness, peace even, zen in the art of starship maintenance. It's nice to be with, or at the very least near, your TV friends, running around their house and going through their medicine cabinet. Is it anything more than an elaborate diorama? Maybe not. But as a counterpoint to the constant run-and-gun action of Elite Force's single-player campaign, it's essential as a way to recenter the true purpose of Star Trek. Star Trek has very few genuinely good games that don't sacrifice some portion of Trek's utopian vision. It's difficult to make a Star Trek game that stays true to Gene Roddenberry's philosophy that's, fun to play. Most of the celebrated and popular games in Trek history focus on, surprise surprise, combat. Combat and conflict are inevitable, they're compelling, and most importantly, they're the easiest to convert into marketable and satisfying gameplay. Even Gene Roddenberry had a problem with this in the 80s when developing Star Trek The Next Generation. In insisting on a world without interpersonal conflict, he accidentally created a television show without character dynamics or narrative impulse. All of the drama had to come from outside threats. Which is to say, balancing this stuff is hard, in both directions, but there is some hope. Recently, Dramatic Labs developed Star Trek Resurgence, a fun Telltale-style game that feels true to the tone and movement of Trek in the TNG era. It's a bit rough around the edges, and the telltale nature of it all makes it feel like it's happening in extremely narrow vignettes in a way that limits the ability to scratch that Star Trek as a place itch. But it's still extremely satisfying, and it's only $25. You also have all of the work the Roddenberry archive has been doing in the name of digitizing the various command bridges of Star Trek, and those walkthrough experiences are fascinating, but eerily empty. Also, the interface is bad. So bad, just give me full screen. I don't need the pseudo LCARs of it all. Or let me pay to have these models in a VR headset at full walkable scale, something, anything, and let me push some more buttons for Pete's sake. Maybe, somewhere out there, some developer is working on my dream game. One where you get to experience life aboard a Federation starship in a compelling adventure that balances RPG elements, exploration, combat, and diplomacy in a... Oh wait, that's just Mass Effect. Thank you all for watching Too Many Tapes. Told you I'd be back. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit the bell icon to get updates for when I upload videos. Also, if you like this video or any of the videos I make, why not recommend me to a friend? With my less than regular upload schedule now, I imagine it'll be harder for the algorithm to pick me up, but let's be frank, it wasn't doing me any favors in the first place. What's your favorite Star Trek game? And why? Let me know in the comments. If you want to help out a small YouTube channel, consider donating $1 or more a month to my Patreon. For just $2 a month, you get early access to my videos. Every dollar I get through my Patreon goes to fund the production of the show, so thank you for your support. If you donate $50 or more a month, like Natto Kitsch, you get a movie recommendation. Except this month, it's a show. This month, I'm recommending to Natto, and everybody really, Star Trek Lower Decks. It just finished its 5-season run on Paramount+, and it's the best Star Trek show since Deep Space Nine. If you can get over the Rick and Mortiness of the first chunk of the first season, you're gonna fall in love with just how much this show loves Star Trek. For $10 or more a month, you get to trigger self-destruct. And for no extra charge, your name also comes big in the credits. And for $5 a month, you're playing with
Time travel.
which means you get early access to my videos. Thank you all again for watching, and I'll see you next time on Too Many Tapes.